Some fans desperately try to suggest that Errol Spence Jr. is afraid to fight Terence Crawford. But Bob Arum says that Errol Spence is not the biggest fight for Terence Crawford, but 140-pound Josh Taylor is. We got to get to the bottom of this. Stay tuned to this very video. We unpacked. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live, Boxingego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live. The future is now. The Hibernation 5s by Kenichi Bear. Hybrid gaming and lifestyle headphones. Out of the box, you can connect to any console or PC. Bluetooth ready with a low latency USB adapter, color RGB, and extreme bass mode. The Hibernation 5s adjust to you. Whether you need a gaming, travel, gym, or lifestyle headphones, the Hibernations got you covered. The new Hibernation 5s, link in the description. Customize the way you hear the world. Welcome to the nation. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Listen, before I get started and start unpacking, I don't know how you found my video, but somehow, some way, you made it. You arrived at the content. Please help others find the content by throwing a like on the video. If you enjoy, simple, it's painless, it's quick, I can assure you, throw a like on the video goes a long way. Now, we unpack. Coming to you live. I got to talk about this. Terence Crawford defeated Shawn Porter, becomes the first ever to stop Shawn Porter. Bravo. Congrats to Terence Crawford. He remains a WBO champion. He remains a badass. He remains undefeated. And, you know, it was a good showing. Some people, including myself, kind of questioned the Kenny Porter's timing in terms of stopping it. Some people think it was good. Nonetheless, you can't change what is already done. Now, Errol Spence was in attendance, and Errol Spence, it looked like he prematurely left right after the conclusion of the fight. He looked like, man, what was that? And he walked out with the, you know, a couple people he came with or whatever, his entourage, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, I've seen the spin doctors in old media. They're trying to somehow, some way suggest that Errol Spence seen the performance and he was so shook that he was ducking. So I want to really unpack this conversation and talk about that. Listen, I respect Errol Spence Jr. He's a damn good champion. I respect Terence Bud Crawford. Both of those guys, I don't know if they fight. I don't know who would win. I really, truly don't. You know, I respect both. I rate them. I think those are the two most established welterweights, and we really don't know. You know, everyone can have an opinion, but we don't know until they fight each other. You know, next up is Jaron Boots Ennis, but, you know, he's in a different position because he's the young gun, and he's going to have to keep doing what he's doing, like Errol Spence and Keith Thurman and welterweights and stuff that came before him. And he's going to have to keep branding himself, keep showing up like he's been doing with Lipinets and Thomas Delorme, and, you know, just keep raising his profile to the point where he has people cornered. So we're going to leave him out of the equation. So it boils down to Errol Spence, Terence Crawford. Now, for whatever reason, these two fan bases seem to have a lot of like just vitriol and animosity towards each other. And I think that's kind of corny, personally, in the sport of boxing. It's like you got to like Jackie Chan or Jet Li. You can't like both of them. You know what I mean? You got to like Batman or Superman. You can't like both of them. You got to like Usher or Justin Timberlake. You know, you got to like Prince or Michael Jackson, you know? And to me, I don't really play them games. Like, I like a lot. There's a lot of stuff that I like, you know what I mean? You can like Drake, J. Cole, and Kendrick Lamar, you know what I mean? They all do their own thing, and they all do their own thing a little bit differently. So I just think it's kind of corny, you know, Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, just some of the stuff I see. But there's this notion that he left and he was afraid. I mean, that's corny as well too, to me, because just knowing just life and scary individuals, if someone's scary, usually they won't put themselves in harm's way or put themselves in that atmosphere or that orbit. For example, Errol Spence, he don't live in Las Vegas. You know, he lives in Texas, got a beautiful family. He could have just stayed put and stayed there and not went to Terence Crawford versus Shawn Porter if he was really and truly scary. And I got to say this about Terence Crawford. As phenomenal a fighter he is, the thing that no one's really questioned Terence Crawford's skills. I never really came across the person, like whether they like Errol Spence or not, that just said Terence Crawford is trash or he can't fight or he's not a dog. You know, I've never really seen these things in conversation. But I will say, when it comes to dealing with Terence Bud Crawford, some of the diehard radical Crawford fans, they seem to be a bit irrational and almost think that everybody's attacking Terence Crawford and hating and not giving props when certain things are facts. And we're entering that age in society where when you speak the truth, some people will classify it as hating, you know? As far as the Errol Spence Jr., from what I've seen, I don't see all this ducking and things that other people have claimed, like Errol Spence leaving. First of all, he's going to be bombarded. If he leaves when everybody's leaving, he's going to be bombarded with 1 million people asking his opinion on Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter. So you try to beat the crowd. Second of all, like I said, if someone's a scary individual, why would they even go to the fight if they was scared of possible confrontation? Because if you go to the fight, you don't know Terence Crawford could see you in the back, or you guys could cross paths or whatever, be in the same hotel, won't. So you just wouldn't go, you know? So I think people are reaching. But again, a lot of the diehard Terence Crawford fans, the radical people, because I'm a fan of Terence Crawford, but I'm also constructive and objective when it comes to any fighter. And Terence Crawford is no exception. He did a good thing. He beat Shawn Porter. I don't think it's a crossover, like, oh, he beat Shawn Porter by stoppage, so he guarantees to whoop Errol. You know, those things those triangle theories don't really work. But Errol leaving, that really means nothing, you know, but people are trying to stretch it. And again, what I've noticed when it comes to Terence Crawford is there's a lot of just a lot of radical narratives, so we can get to the nitty gritty and decide what's the real truth. What's the real truth for Terence Crawford? Now, I've been an avid fan of Terence Crawford. The one thing I haven't been a fan of all the time is the way Terence Crawford has conducted his business. And this is why I decided to do the unpack. The way he's conducted his business, meaning business decisions. There was a point in time where he was a free agent, and what it looks like he's doing now, people were asking for him to do then. But for whatever reason, at that time, see, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, as the old adage goes. Same thing with Terence Crawford. Or, you know, if you know a girl and she's in a DV, domestic violence type of situation, she's in an abusive relationship, you could say whatever you want. Hey, you got to get away from this man, blah, blah, blah. But if she's in love and, you know, psychologically, there's a lot of built up things, then at the end of the day, she's not going to leave unless she feels she has to leave. So again, or just it could be any type of bad relationship. We've all known the person that, you know, you got cheated on by a girl or you got cheated on by a guy and they stay with that person, right? That guy has kids with somebody else and didn't tell you, you know what I mean? Got another girl pregnant, and then that girl stays with the dude who crept out and got a second family and all this, right? We've seen it. We've heard it. And the thing is, I think Terence Crawford, for whatever reason, when people were looking out for him, and see, that's the only thing that I see as an issue is there are some Terence Crawford radicals who believe you're hating on Crawford when you truly want the best for Terence Crawford, like myself. I have never, ever advocated for anything bad for Terence Crawford's career. I've only wanted to see the best. Me, on my channel, using my platform, I have went to several Crawford fights. He could tell you, you know what I'm saying? I was in Omaha. I was in Lincoln, Nebraska when he became undisputed. I went to Vegas for the Jeff Horn fight. I've spent a lot of money supporting Terence Crawford and getting his brand out to the masses. But That doesn't mean he's infallible or flawless, so I can't have an opinion on certain things. That's not how I operate. It's never going to be how I operate. So, like I said, it's cool to like Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, such is the case with me. And again, Terence Crawford, he's a beast. He's very hard to beat, but he's not infallible, especially outside of the ring, you know. And people question these moves and why is he staying with Top Rank? And, you know, at points when Bob Arum recently was throwing him under the bus, they saying like, oh, why you letting that older man, Bob Arum, talk to you like that? Like you, and I've always stood up for Terence Crawford in those regards, because I think it's shameful the way really ESPN, but also Top Rank in general, have not put Terence Crawford as one of the highest priorities in the whole organization. And I just think that's wrong, because you see how good the kid is. You see how much of a competitor he is. For starters, there's a lot of things where I thought Terence Crawford was in a very tough fight. The fight was super competitive with Shawn Porter until it wasn't competitive. You know, that's just the reality of it. There's even a dialogue, which I'll do future videos, so you got to stay tuned to my channel for the latest and greatest. There is dialogue where somebody was mouthing or talking to Terence Crawford, and they're like, hey, you're down, like meaning you're down on the scorecards. And he's like, I ain't down. And they're like, nah, you're down, bro. Porter, they have Porter up. And he's like, I'm down? How am I down? And they're like, man, you down. You got to turn up. You got to do something. He's like, all right, okay. And then that very next round, in round 10, he walked out and then he beat the brakes off Shawn Porter. He turned it up. So you gotta give and pay a lot of respect to Terence Crawford. That's an elite mindset. That's that Tom Brady stuff. That's that Kobe Bryant, that Black Mamba mentality, that Bron James. You know, you can't really teach that. He has that kill switch. He turned it on. Props to him. You know, you can question why Kenny Porter threw in the towel or whatever, but ultimately this drama was started by Terence Crawford hurting Shawn Porter. If he never hurt Shawn Porter, never dropped him twice in one round, and Shawn Porter punched the ground, it would have never forced Kenny Porter to even question it, whether you agree with it or not. So I do rate and respect Terence Crawford, right? But again, for some reason, there's certain Crawford fans that believe there are people out to harm him, and some of the people who may not have had his best interest in their heart are the people closest to him. And that's the craziest thing. So, which leads me to the next thing. People are saying like, oh, Errol Spence is ducking. And I feel like Terence Crawford is just now catching up and getting to the spot where people are like, okay, like, look at how many people seem almost elated that he told Bob Arum that he's going to go his own way. And that's what people were asking for, which leads me and is the perfect segue to what I got to talk about regarding Errol Spence. Roll the clip.
Crawford being out of his contract now, and a fight like this proving that he can compete with the elite at welterweight, which he hasn't had the opportunity to do. Has he expressed to you the necessity of being able to make these fights, make unified title fights, to sign a deal going forward?
I don't think it's a unified title. I mean, Terence, like everybody other fighter, looks at the green.
So right there, I thought that was kind of weird from Bob Arum. He's doing an interview. Link will be in the description. And he says it's not about unifying titles for Crawford. Crawford, like any other fighter, he's looking for the green. So now it's making it sound like Crawford, you know, he's not after necessarily legacy. He's after money. So this is the guy that's been promoting him, Bob Arum, Top Rank, and ESPN, you know, who has an exclusive deal with ESPN. And this is what he's saying. Not ego. This is what he's saying. So I thought that was kind of weird. But let's keep going, shall we?
The dollars. And maybe a Josh Taylor fight is more lucrative than a Spence fight.
So now you see old media is starting to get broken up by the boy Boxingego. This might be a 10-8 round. So old media is pushing this narrative mostly that Errol Spence is ducking and he left and he cut turf and, you know, he took a beeline out of there and got out of here because he was so terrified allegedly that Shawn Porter got stopped, you know, and they're painting this and you're hearing from the guy who's promoting, and I don't know, maybe still trying to work with Crawford. It's going to be real interesting. I'm going to save that for the back half of the conversation. But he's not. He said, moreover than a fight with Errol Spence, a bigger fight is Josh Taylor. And Bob Arum has put and planted this seed much before Crawford Porter. He keeps saying Josh Taylor. So it's just funny and ironic that it doesn't look like Crawford and Bob Arum and Top Rank are seeing eye to eye at this current juncture. Because, again, Bob Arum is telling him that he needs to fight Josh Taylor, but then old media and a lot of the Crawford fans are screaming for an Errol Spence fight. So my question is this. How is Errol Spence ducking? See, I know there's a lot of anti-PBC hate and stuff like that, but how is Errol Spence ducking when you hear Crawford's longtime promoter, maybe up until the Porter fight or the announcement last night or a couple nights ago or whatever, when he fought Porter, he keeps saying Josh Taylor.
Fight is more lucrative. A Josh Taylor fight is more lucrative than a Spence fight, considering that if the fight was in the UK, we would absolutely put 70,000 people into a big outdoor stadium this spring.
So to me, this sounds like a setup similar to Manny Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn. Again, these are the decisions that have hurt Crawford. Terence Crawford should have been given Manny Pacquiao when they were both on Top Rank. Terence Crawford was promised Manny Pacquiao, never got Manny Pacquiao, and they gave it to a Caucasian Australian school teacher who had a record of like 15-0, 16-0, and his biggest name on his whole record was Randall Bailey. Meanwhile, Terence Crawford is one of the continued best fighters that Top Rank has had in the last 10 years, and he was never given the Pacquiao fight. And then when Pacquiao loses, which I didn't think Pacquiao lost to Jeff Horn, I thought he should have beat him. Even Teddy Atlas agreed with this, who was with ESPN at the time, right? Pacquiao, I want to, it's up to my promoter, He really didn't lose to Jeff Horn, in my opinion, right? But after he lost and Jeff Horn beat him, then Top Rank and Bob Arum gave Crawford Jeff Horn. And this was the very first fight of Crawford's welterweight career. As I mentioned, I went to the fight. I covered that fight for you guys, and we know what was going to happen. Crawford destroyed him. But the problem is, here lies the problem. That wasn't a legacy fight, especially considering there are many people, such as myself, that didn't believe Jeff Horn was even a real champion because Pacquiao should have beaten him that night, right? And this is part of the mess that Crawford had. Then Crawford continued to get promised fights with the bigger names like Pacquiao, and then, you know, year by year, in 2020, he said he's going to fight Pacquiao in Qatar, and then the next year in 2021, he said he was going to fight him in Abu Dhabi, and guess who got the fight before him? Errol Spence and Ugas. The only reason Errol Spence Pacquiao didn't have, they did a press conference and everything. Only reason it didn't happen is because Errol Spence had a retinal tear and an injury forced him out of the fight last minute, and Ugas stepped up and beat Pacquiao. That's the only reason Errol Spence didn't get it. To double down, Errol Spence said blame Bob, #blame Bob, when he announced the Pacquiao fight. So, you know, Crawford is just now catching up to what people have been telling him, including myself and Errol Spence. And again, Bob Arum has his own priority, and he's trying to make a Josh Taylor fight, which sounds like a setup. You know, why is Crawford, he was undisputed before Josh Taylor. Why does Crawford have to go to the UK in front of 70,000 people against Crawford and then fight under those terms? You know, it sounds like because you never take an away game when you don't have to. Crawford was undisputed before Josh Taylor. So I know he's not scared. You know, Crawford's a dog. He's not scared. But you go and fight in front of 70,000 people in Scotland or wherever, in front of Josh Taylor's home crowd. Every time he punches, or if there's any drama, they're going to be cheering. And we've seen what happened with Oscar Valdez and Robson Conceição. One of the judges had this horrendous scorecard, and he worked and he was appointed for the WBC, and he came out and apologized and said he was distracted by the photographers and the crowd noise distracted him and influenced him. So imagine Crawford fighting in Josh Taylor's hometown, and Josh Taylor's undisputed coming off the Jose Ramirez fight. You know, you just don't take that type of penitentiary chance if you don't have to. But this is what Bob Arum is suggesting, you know, because Terence Crawford can go to Scotland, and if the fight's close, what if the judge has these like chintzy scorecards, and then you're like, oh, what? And then guess what? Josh Taylor's a WBO champion right then and there. And this is what Terence Crawford's longtime promoter is advocating for. So while old media is begging and imploring and saying that Errol Spence is ducking, Bob Arum, who was working with Crawford for all these years, is not doing a good job of supporting that, because he's saying that he has a bigger fight that is a 140-pounder who doesn't have a single sole fight at 47, at least against any big names, and he's saying this is the better fight. So there's where we have some shaky ground. Let's go.
So there's a lot of moving parts there. Now, the Spence fight would do, I think, a very big number. Al and I will sit down and talk about it.
Has Crawford, though, expressed the need to put something like that in the deal to sign going forward? What has he asked you for?
Nothing.
He said, has Crawford asked you to put anything like Spence in the deal? He says, no, nothing. Crawford hasn't asked for nothing. So once again, old media keeps pitching this idea that Errol Spence is ducking Terence Crawford, but Terence Crawford, the guy who's working with him up until last Saturday, is saying that Crawford hasn't asked for the Spence fight. Looking shaky. To
put something like that in the deal to sign going forward. What has he asked you for?
Nothing. It's what Terence is in the position where he can wait and see what we're offering him.
Thank you.
Bob, were you encouraged to see Errol Spence in the building? What does that mean? Does that give some hype for him?
That PBC gave him a ticket. That's what it means.
I think it means more than that.
Do you think it'll discourage him based on what Terence just did to Shawn Porter?
How the fuck would I know?
Bob Arum be ether media. He said, how the F would I know?
How the fuck would I know? If it would discourage him or encourage him, I mean, you got to ask him. I mean, that's or left. Okay, but again, Errol Spence is a good fighter. He's a brave guy, and whether he wants to fight Terence or not,
he's a good fighter and a brave guy. So again, Terence Crawford's longtime promoter is not doing a great job of making Errol Spence look like this coward. He just told you that Terence Crawford hasn't asked me for anything regarding the Spence fight. And now, like, I'm not saying Bob Arum always, speaks the true gospel, but at the same time, now that Terence Crawford has seemingly announced his split as a free agent and say, how's Bob Arum going to give me these fights? Now the gloves are off. Bob Arum really has no reason to lie, especially when Crawford did that at the post-fight press conference and basically said, how's Bob going to give me anything when I'm not with Bob? In layman's terms, that's what he said. It's not looking good for old media.
He wants to fight Terence or not, that's up to him and Al. I'll certainly talk to Al about a possible putting them together.
It's really, I mean, can you make the case? I think a lot of us can, that's the best fight that the welterweight division can make.
Well, no, I think so. The fight I want to see, I would like to see, is Terence and Josh Taylor.
So right there you have a member of media who is advocating, say, hey, you can really, like, they're throwing Bob Arum the easiest pitches. The easiest. So Bob Arum, to support old media's narrative that Errol Spence is ducking, these pitches Bob Arum should be able to Babe Ruth, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGuire, Barry Bonds. He should be able to knock it out the park. Like, man, You got to admit, the best fight that could be made in the welterweight division is Terence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence. And the stage is set for Bob Arum to corroborate and say, yeah, we're trying to make these fights with the PBC guys, but Errol Spence is ducking. And what does he say? He reiterates what you just heard at the beginning and says, no, I don't agree that that's the biggest welterweight fight. To me, it's Josh Taylor, which is what he said all throughout the night. So Boxingego 1, Old Media none.
I'll certainly talk to Al about a possible putting them together.
It's really, I mean, can you make the case? I think a lot of us can, that that's the best fight that the welterweight division can make.
Well, no, I think so. The fight I want to see, I would like to see, is Terence and Josh Taylor. Two of the fighters, one currently and one previously, who were undisputed in their weight class.
Bob, do you believe that fight that Porter and Crawford and Taylor is as lucrative as Spence Crawford?
I think it's more because of the UK.
Once again, they said, do you think Crawford versus Taylor would be as lucrative as Spence? He says Josh Taylor and Crawford is more lucrative.
Taylor is as lucrative as Spence Crawford.
I think it's more because of the UK. As soon as that, Taylor is huge in the UK, so is Crawford. We can do 70,000 seats and do probably 1.5 million, 2 million pay-per-view and put it at an hour where we could still do pay-per-view over here in the United States. So I haven't penciled it out completely, but I think the most lucrative fight for Terence would be Josh Taylor.
Wow. And there you have it. So old media keeps saying that PBC, Al Heyman, Errol Spence, they're the problem. They're the reason that the great Bud Crawford cannot get any dope fights. That's what they're telling you. But Bob Arum is telling you something different. He's telling you, hey, I got my own priority and I got my own fight that I want to make. So while old media is pushing this narrative like, oh, Errol Spence got out of his seat because he was petrified. Ooh, he was scared. He was, he seen what happened to Shawn Porter and he didn't want none of that. Well, guess what? Bob Arum's still kind of throwing Crawford under the bus, saying Crawford is motivated by green, by money, and it's not about unifying and legacy. He also said, to recap, that Crawford and his side, his attorneys or whatever, haven't asked me anything about an Errol Spence fight. And he's also saying that after the Shawn Porter fight, the fight that all of old media is pushing for, the Errol Spence fight, a mutual opponent was Shawn Porter, and Crawford stopped him, which Errol Spence and Keith Thurman and others hadn't. He's saying that's not even the biggest fight out there. The biggest fight is a 140-pounder moving up, and that's the biggest fight that I want to make. So this, in my opinion, has constantly been the conundrum that Terence Bud Crawford has been in. No matter how much he wants the big fights, if your own promoter has different priorities and a different agenda that they're looking to make, then guess what? You're not getting Pacquiao and you're not getting Spence and et cetera. You know what I'm saying? Like Bob Arum just recently said he don't got $5 million that he's willing to give Devin Haney to make the Teofimo fight. So this is the situation. This is why, in my opinion, a lot of guys have left Top Rank once they got to that echelon of like pay-per-view stardom. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., Mikey Garcia, Andy Ruiz, Floyd Mayweather famously, Oscar De La Hoya, Miguel Cotto, right? This is why, because they get to a certain level, and I don't know if the star build works for what the star fighter wants, and PBC seems like the place to go where you want to be a pay-per-view star. And it looks like Top Rank, what they do well is Top Rank is very good if you're turning pro out to amateurs and stuff like that, grooming the fighter, grooming the fighter and getting them, on TV, getting them 15-0 and all, that type of stuff. But after that, when you're like a Crawford and you're trying to get the big fight, sometimes you be starved out trying to get the big fights. If they don't want you to fight Pacquiao, you're not getting Pacquiao. Jeff Horn could get him, NBF, no black fighter. He could get him, but you can't. And that's what it is, and that's what I've seen. And the same thing you see for Lil Shakur Stevenson in the same position as Crawford for the most part, right? Where talented fighter, just beat Jamel Herring. He's ready for the world. He want to fight against Oscar Valdez, the guy he's been calling out. But guess what? Bob Arum, just like he's saying, so the whole world is saying Errol's ducking. Well, not the whole world, but old media is saying Errol Spence is ducking. He don't want no smoke with Terence Crawford. Make the Errol Spence Terence Crawford is the best welterweight fight. Bob Arum, he's like, no, I like Terence Crawford and Josh Taylor. 70,000 in the UK. So you have an American promoter and an American broadcaster, ESPN. They want Crawford to fight a Caucasian Josh Taylor in another country across the pond rather than the all-American fight with two black fighters. Like I said, time and time again on the channel, the black dollar is frequently disrespected and not respected in the world of boxing. He's telling you, Bob Arum just told you out of his own, this is not me paraphrasing, out of his own mouth. He told you. He thinks the bigger, more lucrative fight is Crawford going to the UK. So it's going to be real interesting to see with what Crawford said and, his last performance, defeating Shawn Porter, bravo, right? His next move, I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see who he joins forces with. It looks like he's with MTK or Daniel Kinahan, I guess. I don't know what their long-term deal is, but, this all eyes on Bud. We'll see what he decides to do. Right now, he remains undefeated. He remains a champion. He remains a beast and a monster. So, wish him the best. But I think the problem is very obvious, and people want to just easily blame Errol Spence and say he's the problem and PBC and stuff, but you got to look at what's going on. And what's going on is much deeper than that. MBF, like I said, Bob Arum, an American broadcaster or American broadcast partner, top rank American company with mostly American staff and an American broadcaster in ESPN Plus pay-per-view. They're telling an American badass, Terence Crawford, to go fight in the UK at a deficit, like I mentioned earlier in this video. We Unpacked coming to you live in front of 70,000 of Josh Taylor's fans. You don't see a problem there? I don't know what else to tell you. But congrats to Crawford on his victory. I don't think he's afraid of Errol Spence. I don't think Errol Spence is afraid of him. If the fight happens, then it happens. If it doesn't, chalk it up to the game and politics and things like that. But this is no surprise. This is what people complained about for Crawford. He's a monster. He's a beast, but you got to get your business in order, partner. Let me know how I did in this video. We unpacked. Are you tired of your YouTube videos not getting any views? Well, consider TubeBuddy. I've used TubeBuddy for years to scale up my YouTube channel. Now we're sitting over 200,000 subscribers. TubeBuddy is a browser extension that offers a ton of built-in productivity and time-saving services to take your channel to the next level. Use my link in the description to get started with TubeBuddy and level up your channel faster.